Hello everybody, this is Mandy at Laugh and Grackle. We are going to be having our witching hour today, so let's get started. Today's oracle card is Sacred Vows. These are the vows of how a witch is supposed to conduct his or herself. Some of these vows talks about integrity, about doing things a certain way every time, because that's the right way for us to do it. That is what is right for us to do. Some other people might do it differently, but that's okay for them. But this is how I do it, and this is why I do it this way. That is doing things with integrity, backing our stuff up with honor and doing things the right way because it's right to do so, not because it's a trend or it's cool to do that way, to get more things from it, like money, fame, or recognition for doing it. The vows are there to be a guide of why we're doing this stuff in the first place, to share our gifts with others and doing right by every single person we come in contact with and dealing with others accordingly. Sacred vows. This is about how, these particular vows are supposed to be the way that a witch performs business, I guess. And whenever we are talking about these vows, integrity is a big one. And that is about doing things a certain way each and every time that we're doing it. Yes, it could be considered a ritual, but this is about how to do things. We're not doing it that way because we're trying to gain something. This is about, because this is the right way for us. And whenever you sit there and you've got that going on, other people are going to say, that they do it different or, all that stuff. But that's okay. It's supposed to be theirs. And, if they do it that way, then that's good for them. Not, it doesn't have to be right for us. And, we've got to do things the right way. If you can sit there and you can explain that to somebody, this is how I do it because, I do it this way for this reason. And, like on my reads, I tell them straight out, I don't really want to know the question that you're asking because, if I tell you something that, either you haven't told anybody about or, something like that, then it's real. And, that's the reason why I do it that way. And, because I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody a whole bunch of doubly-dook, just because. I don't tell people, what they want to hear. I tell them what they need to hear. And that's a difference. And to me, that's my form of integrity. And I do things this way because of that. And there's a lot of people out there that do things because it's a trend, or just that they get something from it, or things like that. That's not the reason why we do it. At least it shouldn't be, at least in my mind, because the main thing is to help other people. And these are the vows that are supposed to guide you into doing the right thing. And whenever we sit there and we start doing it for other things, it kind of deals with some really weird kind of thing. Something in the back of your head's going, this ain't right, this ain't right. And we're supposed to be here to share our gifts. And whenever we sit there and we do it the right way, every single person that we come into contact with, if we do it that way, they know they're getting it, and if we sit there and other people can't seem to deal with that, you just kind of have to deal with them on your own. And just sit there and go, well, you can always find somebody else. You don't have to go with me. And I am more than happy to sit there and tell somebody that, because of that. So we are going to be having our vampires a little bit later on, so come on back and see me.